Hey everyone, today I'm going to take you on a tour of some of Brisbane's bikeways, starting from Sylvan Road into Wong, heading into the city via the Bicentennial Bikeway behind me, then heading south along the V1 Veloway towards Nathan and Griffith University, then head west through Salisbury onto the Ipswich Motorway Bikeway, through to Oxley and back onto the Centenary Bikeway. Now, a simple bikeway tour isn't very compelling on YouTube, so I thought I'd add a little bit to it by subjectively quantifying each segment of the route as I go. And I'm going to use a few different criteria for that, and I'm going to rank them. And then, as is the trend with social media these days, I'm going to do a tier list. So I don't know how this is going to work out, but let's give it a crack. So there's 5 main criteria I've used to do this, and I've weighted them based on what I think is the most important. So top of the list is LTS, or level of traffic stress. Now, that's pretty much as the name implies, it's the amount of stress you feel when you're riding along that route, and that's all relative to how much traffic there is, what sort of speed there is, and what separation there is. So the lower the score, the better. So level of traffic stress 1 is a totally separated environment like this, where it's suitable for people of all ages and abilities. A level of traffic stress 2, it's mostly separated, but there might be some slow streets that you're involved in, or with low traffic. That's pretty much anyone who's relatively comfortable, so interested but concerned people can ride on that. Level of traffic stress 3, a little bit more stressful. It's sort of your typical suburban street with possibly not much separation, or maybe an on-road bike lane and parked cars and things like that. That's where your enthused and confident people will be pretty comfortable to ride, but you're interested but concerned are going to start doubting themselves. And then level of traffic stress 4, which doesn't feature in this video at all, that's your high traffic, high speed, no infrastructure. That's just where your confident road cyclists are going to go. So then we have comfort, and that's all about things like how flat it is relative to the terrain, what kind of shade there is, how exposed you are to vehicle noise and emissions, stink, but also how well it's signposted, so you know how to navigate it and how easy it is to find and that sort of thing. Then there's connections, so that's all about what destinations are there along the route, how useful are they, what other bike routes connect to it, because pretty much these bike routes, their main benefit is that they connect you to places. Crossings, that's a lot to do with the level of traffic stress as well, but crossings is particularly important because if you have to use all your judgment and motorists don't have to give you any priority, then that's a bit of a challenge. So the more grade separated crossings there are, traffic light controlled, and the amount of time that you spent waiting having to cross, those all factor into that. And the last one is about upgrades, and that's a pretty generic one. So basically it's a score out of 3. 0, there's no upgrades planned at all. 1, there's some vague semblance of an idea of a plan. 2, there's funding for planning actually happening. And 3, upgrades are underway. So with all up, that gives you a score out of 50 once you take in the weighting into account. And my tier list will be based on what those overall scores are. All right, that's enough faffing around. Let's head out to Sylvan Road and have a look. So we'll begin with Sylvan Road, and it's not really just Sylvan Road. It sort of starts at the end of the Centenary Bikeway and includes this bit through the Brisbane Transport bus depot. And then you've got a bit of an uncontrolled crossing of Miskin Street, which is sometimes pretty intimidating because from the left here, you've got vehicles coming flying off the roundabout that are sort of off the motorway in Milton Road. And you sort of got to try and make your way across, and it's a little bit hairy. But anyway, so this links from the Centenary Bikeway to the Bicentennial Bikeway, and it's actually one of the most busy cycling routes in Brisbane. So it carries around, 3,000 cyclists a day on commute days, and it's pretty busy on the weekend, as you can even see with this example. So you come from the shared path, and then you have to get onto the road itself. And again, you sort of got to have your wits about you, look at your traffic there. And then this is the road. So it's just a standard suburban road, 50 kilometers an hour, with a painted bike lane wedged between moving traffic and parked cars. You've got the curbs here, which mean that it can be a little bit more awkward. You'll see on the markings there that there are parking restrictions that apply here during peak times. So Monday to Friday from 6 to 9 a.m. and outbound 4 till 7 p.m. And that has made a difference. But you can see there's lots of side streets, there's lots of cars parked. We're going past Toowong State School here, and it's just not the nicest environment for somewhere that's carrying quite a lot of bike traffic. And unfortunately, this route has had its fair share of bike crashes. So if we're looking at this in terms of the criteria, we've got, for a level of traffic stress, this is really a 3 out of 4. So where I'm filming at the moment, it's fairly quiet in terms of traffic, but you can see you've got no separation between yourself and the parked cars. You're up in between them here. This set of traffic lights here, the bike lanes actually congest even more where you've got this intersection, so you come through there, vehicles are passing you. It's not the nicest environment, so it's definitely for the enthused and confident, it's certainly something that interested but concerned cyclists do find quite intimidating. And as I said, this is the link between the Western Freeway or Centenary Bikeway and Bicentennial Bikeway, which are very, very busy and all ages and abilities compatible. So, this is the weakest link by far connecting to the western suburbs. So in terms of comfort, you can see that it's quite shady. Well, there's some lovely street trees, so it's not too bad. Connections, it connects Toowong State School, it connects the Centenary Bikeway and Western Freeway and Bicentennial Bikeway, as I said. So that's very, very good. So it scores quite well there. I get a 3 out of 5. Crossings, it's ordinary. So there was the ones that we saw at the start, Michigan Street, the intersection with Jefferson Street and Croydon Street with the traffic lights. That was ordinary. This one coming up on Patrick Lane is a bit better. It's been redesigned so that there's actually a little bit of protection on the intersection for the cycle lane. But there's lots of side streets as well, and I consider those crossings as well, so that's not great. And in terms of upgrades, well, giving it a 1. And that's because there's some really vague mention from the new local council that they're looking at putting a bikeway in on Sylvan Road. But it's literally just one line in a newsletter, so I don't even really know if that counts as a plan for a plan or just a discussion of a plan, but it's something. So that comes out to a total score of 25.8, and on my ranking system, that puts it into the C tier list. So not great, and particularly for something that's such an important link in the bikeway network, it could definitely be much improved. And the best way to improve that would be to have a protected bike lane, either two-way, but in my view, single lane protected bike lanes on both sides of Sylvan Road through the full length, so that you've actually got a high quality connection between the Western Freeway Bikeway and the Bicentennial Bikeway. And this is the Bicentennial Bikeway. Now, this is pretty much as good as it gets in Brisbane. So it's a lovely separated bikeway. You can see it's got dedicated bike lanes, pedestrian path, below grade from the Coronation Drive, which is a very busy road, up to the left, right alongside the river. And this bikeway is extremely popular. It carries over 4,000 cyclists a day. A lot of them are commuters, so it's people going to the CBD for work, but also to the University of Queensland, which is in the other direction to which I'm travelling. So it's an extremely important link. It started out as just a narrow little shared path that was built in the 1980s, and it's just gradually been improved over time. And now it's without doubt an absolute pinnacle of the cycling network. It's very much uninterrupted, runs all the way from here to the Goodwill Bridge, which is what we're doing here. Yeah, it's a wonderful place to ride. You get a lovely view of the river. It's really relaxing. So in terms of level of traffic stress, it's a 1 out of 4. This is as separated as it can get. The only kind of tension you can sometimes get is a pedestrian walking on the bike lane itself, which you've got to be aware of a little bit. But yeah, there's no traffic stress. It's safe for all ages and abilities. There's kids, there's older people, there's you're fit and fearless. Everyone is welcome and comfortable here, and it's how the cycling network should be. In terms of comfort, it's a 5 out of 5 as well. You can see it's nice and shaded. There's places to stop and sit down. There's water bubblers.
It's very easy to follow. It's a straight line along the river. You're not going to get lost. It's it's flat. I mean, you can't fault it. There's just nothing bad to say in terms of comfort. Connections, 4 out of 10, 4 out of 5 for that one in my view. The only point that I'm losing for that is when we're going through the city itself. It's not that easy to get up into the CBD itself. There's quite steep ramps, and at the moment with a lot of the work going on in the city, a lot of those access ramps are actually closed. But as you go along, you can get access to Suncorp Stadium, you can get access to the University of Queensland. As I said, it connects to Sylvan Road and the Western Freeway Bikeway. It connects to the Goodwill Bridge. It connects to the to the Botanic Gardens and the route through into the CBD there and onto CityLink. You can get onto the Goodwill Bridge and go across, also the Go-Between Bridge and go across to South Brisbane as well. It's really well connected. Crossings is fine. Like, there's no issues with crossings ever. In fact, I think that there aren't really any crossings, so not a factor to consider at all. In terms of upgrades, I've given this a 0. Now, that might be a little bit controversial because there is a plan at the moment, or there's work underway at the moment with the Queen's Wharf Casino development to upgrade parts of the Bicentennial Bikeway. But I'm giving it a 0 because at the same time, part of that development is going to actually create a shared plaza, if you like. So it's basically a pedestrian plaza in the middle of the Bicentennial Bikeway. It's just going to be, there's no bike lane going to be painted through it. It's just going to be a group of inebriated bollards, as we like to say. So using drunk people as bollards. It's unfathomable that they're doing this in this development. It's been something we've argued long and hard, but they just will not listen, and it's not going to be good. So I'm giving this a flat 0. That it's going to actually detract from the quality of this bikeway, and it's really disappointing. But for all that whinging, it is a very, very high quality bikeway, and there's no surprise that it comes out with a total score of 45 out of 50, and this is my first entry in the S tier. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that.
So once you get off the Bicentennial Bikeway, you want to get across the river to the south side, and to do that we're going to go across the Goodwill Bridge. It was built around about 20 years ago now, and it was a shared cycling and pedestrian bridge. And you see this little plaza at the end here is actually, it looks a bit chaotic, but it works really well, because one thing about cycling and pedestrians is generally we can just sort it out. It's not like conflict with motorists where drivers just need to be directed how they're going to go, and this is much less stressful. In saying that, this bridge has been redesigned recently with surfacing so that the center of the bridge is supposed to be pretty much your cycling route and your edges are for pedestrians, but it doesn't necessarily work that way. People sort of walk all over the bridge, and it's just something you got to live with. But this connection goes across to the southern end of South Bank. It'll take us along the street through Dock Street, I think it is, heading towards the V1 Veloway. So this is a beautiful bridge to ride across. It's a spectacular view of the river and the city, and heading into South Brisbane. So it's no wonder that it's always very busy, whether it's the weekend or during the week. It's a great connection from the north to the south side of the river. So then once again we come to this plaza at the end, and this is a little bit more conflict ridden, and this is actually which lowers the level of traffic stress in my opinion from a 1 to a 2. That corner there is really awkward, and you've got this shared zone sort of thing, which is supposed to be a 20k an hour road, but drivers frequently do more than that, so you don't have that physical separation. So it just unfortunately just slightly takes it away from that all ages and abilities comfort. Still quite a comfortable environment to ride in, so that's why it's 2 out of 5. As I said, level of traffic stress is a 2 for this section. Comfort is 5. You can see it's beautifully shaded. There's no issues with navigation, and it's really quite a pleasant place to ride. Connections, I give it 4 out of 5. So obviously this connects to CBD and South Brisbane, and you can get across to the Stanley Street Bikeway towards the Gabba as well. So lovely connections involved here, and you can continue on past the V1 to Kangaroo Point itself. And crossings, 3 out of 5, and unfortunately it's let down by the crossing onto the Veloway itself, and there's not a priority crossing for it, which is very unfortunate, and there's no upgrades planned for this section of bikeway. So with all that said, it gets a score of 37.2 out of 50, and that gives it a B on the tier list. So if I could just ask for one improvement along here, it would be to make this crossing coming up a priority crossing, and even close off the road to through traffic, because it's not necessary for cars to get through here, and it would just make it that little bit more comfortable. The V1 Veloway. Now, Bicentennial Bikeway is, in my view, the best in Brisbane. The V1 Veloway is not far behind, and it stretches a really long way. So this is the very start of it at Kangaroo Point, and it stretches all the way out to Springwood at the moment, which is a good 20-25 kilometers south from here. So that's a really long stretch of high quality bikeway. So the start of it here, it's all bike only. There's no pedestrian access permitted, and it's quite good. But it's separated like this pretty much the whole way. In fact, there's very few sections of it that are shared, and it's well separated from motor traffic. Although, as you can tell, there's a bit of traffic noise around because you are right alongside the Southeast Freeway. So this first section through Woolloongabba, it's a little bit winding, not as wide as some of the newer sections further along, but it's still perfectly good. There's nothing really to complain about at all. Being a very straight bikeway, wayfinding is definitely not an issue. But even at the moment, there's a detour in place while they're doing some works on O'Keefe Street, and this is probably the best signed and marked detour I've ever seen. So you get diverted off the Veloway here, and it's a nice, well-crafted temporary shared path down onto this street, and then onto the shared street at the moment, which would generally lower the level of traffic stress a little bit, or raise it, but this is pretty comfortable. Coming along the street, and then it's very well marked that the bike lane goes off to the left. So you've got the cones directing you there, arrows on this ramp, and yeah, it's very narrow here. This is just the old footpath which is being repurposed as a temporary bikeway route, but tunnel underneath the road here. But you can't get lost. And there's been detours with the Brisbane Metro project and some others that I've got lost completely, and I've never actually managed to go the right way. But I would challenge even the most navigationally challenged individual to get lost on this detour. I think you'd have a really hard time getting lost. So really well done to the project for this detour. It's top notch, and that's what we want to see more of. So you come up, and this is, you cross the road here, and it's nice to see that this was on Dwellon Green, so we didn't have to press a button to get across the road. Great to see. And then this takes you up to the O'Keefe Street crossing, which will be a thing of the past once this project is completed and there's a bridge across, which will be really fantastic. Now, I might be a little bit harsh on the crossings rating here, but I'm giving it 3 out of 5, and mostly that is because of the O'Keefe Street crossing, which is, in fairness, it's being built with a bridge over the top of the road now, but at the moment you do have to wait for traffic lights to get across O'Keefe Street, and you've got to cross Carl Street, which is an unprotected crossing, and drivers don't really understand that rule about giving way to cyclists crossing a side street, which is a little bit annoying. There's also an at-grade crossing at Birdwood Road, and then a not so great little shared path along Birdwood Road there to get onto stage E of the Veloway heading towards Griffith Uni. But again, that's sort of in the plans to get upgraded. And one thing you can tell is that it is a little less shaded than some of the other bikeways, certainly the less shade than you get on the Bicentennial, just because you don't have that tree embankment alongside it. So it can be quite hot in the summer, and if it's raining, there's really nowhere to protect you, but it's still extremely comfortable really to ride on. It's very flat, it follows the main motorway, so it's, there's no major undulations. There's a few little ups and downs, but nothing desperately different to the accompanying road environment, and that's really what counts in terms of whether something's flat or not. Connections are very, very good. I've only taken 1 point off for connections only because as we get further along, there's quite a long distance between access points to the V1. It's treated a little bit more like a motorway, so there's only the interchanges, if you like, where you can get on and off it. So that means if you might often have to backtrack to get to or from it from your destination, but that's a pretty minor quibble. Which brings us to upgrades, and that's definitely a 3 out of 3. There's some great upgrades already under construction, more being planned, so the Veloway is getting better all the time, and at the moment that gives it a score of 41.2, which gives it an A on the tier list. But I think with some of these upgrades that'll undoubtedly get pushed up into the S tier in the coming years. So from the V1 Veloway, our route starts to turn west, and so we take a right onto this inter-campus link between the Griffith Uni campuses at Mount Gravatt and Nathan, and we're heading towards the Nathan campus. A fairly narrow shared path for that inter-campus link, but it's pretty comfortable. And for most of the route, we're on paths like this which are fully separated, just a brief section through the university on a road which is not separated, but it's fairly low speed and low traffic, so overall it's still got a level of traffic stress of 2. Comfort, I mean, this path's a bit narrow. It's a lovely environment, it's shady, but it's also a little bit isolated. It's pretty easy to get lost, like not so much on this path because there is only one way to go. Once you get to the university, it can be quite disorientating to know which direction you're supposed to turn. There's not a lot of signage, and then it's not terribly easy to find your connection onto the Nathan Ridge track, which takes you to the Toohey Forest recreational area, which then joins onto the shared path that takes you down to Salisbury. So you sort of got to know where you're going. The fact that there's quite a lot of pedestrians that share this path as well, it can be a little bit awkward at times. You got to go slow and be courteous, but that can lower the comfort levels a little bit. In terms of connections, well, there aren't really many. I mean, this path just connects you straight to the university, so that's good. So it's a link between the university and V1 Veloway. There's not many other bikeways that this route connects to. It just eventually gets you onto the Salisbury Bikeway, which is where we'll be heading to next. Crossings also not great. There aren't many of them, but where you do it, it's just waiting for traffic lights, and or you got to make your own way across the road through the university. So pretty low score on that, and there's no upgrades planned. So all up, this comes out to a score of 25.8 out of 50, which is it's a solid C on the tier list anyway. So getting from Salisbury to the Ipswich Motorway Bikeway at Rockley is a bit of an interesting experience, and I managed to not record the first bit where you cross Evans Road, which is a fairly busy 4-lane strode to get onto the Salisbury Bikeway initially. So this is where you come out from the shared path and then onto another road, which you head up towards Lillian Avenue and down to the Salisbury Bikeway to Riowena Drive, and you can sort of get the feel that this is not a very comfortable environment. So a lot of this is on the road. This is not a steep hill, but it's uphill, so I'm going pretty slow. And you're coming up towards a roundabout, which, roundabouts are not well designed in Australia generally. If you've seen videos from Not Just Bikes or pretty much anyone overseas, and you see the wonderful roundabout designs they have in Europe, this is not that.
For some reason, we design roundabouts with the intention that people can drive through them in a straight line without really having to slow down. And it just defeats the purpose of what roundabouts are. Anyway, so this is part of the Salisbury Bikeway connection. So it's going past the state school here. There's some shops up ahead as well. So there's quite a lot of useful connections. But unfortunately, I imagine that this is not that well used by local cyclists. Maybe wrong. But it could be really, really useful. There could be so many transport trips. There's shops here, there's a school. It connects down to the major bikeway. If you can get into that, the Griffith Uni bikeway going the other way, you can get to the V1 quite comfortably. So there's potential here if they would just do it a little bit better. This downhill section is fun, I've got to say. And at the end of the road, we join up to the Salisbury Bikeway. And this has been upgraded recently and it's quite nice. It's a fairly wide shared path. The sound barrier to the left keeps you sheltered from the noise from the traffic. This is quite a pleasant environment. And then we end up at Beaudesert Road, and this crossing is gross. I might have to speed up the video here, but it was a long wait. So this is like a 6-lane, 8-lane strode even. I don't know. There's so many lanes, it's impossible to count them all, to be honest. It's a very, very busy intersection, and you've got no choice but to wait in the hot sun. It's pretty damn uncomfortable. So finally we get to cross the road. That's nice. And you get across the lights, and this is a rare slip lane that actually has a zebra crossing marked on it. But the road rules would say that you have to give way anyway, but not an issue there anyway. Then onto a shared path. A little bit of filtered permeability here, but boy oh boy, that's narrow with those posts, isn't it? And back onto a shared path through the park. And then this is all on road along here. So this is sort of parallel to Granard Road, which is a very major strode off to the left side. This is 40k an hour area, but it really doesn't actually feel comfortable. So this is a back route towards the Bunnings at Rocklea. So yes, there was a guy in a ute behind me on the way here, and you know, a guy in a ute is what a guy in a ute is. They're generally trying to get to the Bunnings sausage sizzle as quickly as they can, so they're not terribly keen to be patient behind you. So in fairness, the level of traffic stress for this section of this tour is definitely 3 out of 4. It's quite high. If you're enthused and confident and you're happy to take primary position like this, it's okay. But if you're less confident, this probably isn't going to appeal to you. In terms of comfort, again, it's a 2 out of 5. You're quite exposed. I mean, you can see that the sun is blaring down on the road here. It's not terribly comfortable at all. It's a little bit awkward actually then from here. There's a shared path we're trying to get to, but getting onto it is quite difficult. So you actually turn in as if you're going in towards Bunnings, then hop on this island, and of course none of these vehicles realise that they're meant to give way to you crossing the slip lane. And a very narrow footpath, which then takes you to the shared path that was recently completed as part of the Ipswich motorway upgrades. And this is much better. So this is part of the connection to the Ipswich motorway bikeway. So connections, it's a 3 out of 5. I mean, you've got the Salisbury State School, you've got shops, you've got this bikeway and some other local bikeways like the Rocky Waterhole bikeway. So there's a few connections around here. It's just very, very difficult to navigate your way unless you know where you're going. In terms of crossings, yeah, well, we saw the roundabout. That's not ideal. And other crossings are a little haphazard as well. This section's actually better, obviously, where this shared path was built. So there's a traffic light control crossing just ahead. It was a little bit disappointing. Like, I don't know if you can, well, hopefully you can see it when we get to it, but there's some sensor lines there on the road. I on the path. I had hoped that they would actually detect that I was approaching the lights and it would trigger them for me, but I don't think it does. So beg button it is, but small wait relatively speaking. But earlier on there was a much longer wait, as we saw at Beaudesert Road. So yeah, not great. And there's no upgrades that I'm aware of being planned here. So that brings this out at a pretty disappointing 22.8 out of 50, and that's a D on the tier list. I can imagine it would be much lower if this bit hadn't have been built. Next up is the Ipswich Motorway Bikeway, which was built as part of the Ipswich Motorway upgrade between Oxley and Rocklea. And it's pretty good. It's got a separated cycleway for most of it until you get to about Oxley Creek, and then it converts into a shared path for the rest of the way, and it ends at the Oxley roundabout. Do have to wait a little bit for crossings. So the bikeway is fully separated from traffic, and so that gives you a level of traffic stress of 1. This is something that people of all ages and abilities would be able to ride on quite safely. It's probably not the most comfortable bikeway. As you can see, it's extremely exposed, so in the summer heat this is quite unpleasant. And you've also got the motorway next to you on the left and the service road to your right, so you feel a little bit jammed in with fast moving traffic on either side, although as you can see at the moment it's pretty quiet when I was riding through. Connections aren't too bad. At one end you've got the Granard Road shared path and the route that we just saw towards Salisbury and the V1 Veloway. Along the way there's an underpass to the Oxley Creek bikeway, which that takes you into Oxley, and you can actually get onto the Archerfield Wetlands gravel path from there. And there's also connections through, once you get to Oxley, to Oxley State School and some of the shops there. But yeah, connections could be a lot better. There's not that many options in between, and the next stage of this tour is extremely lacking, and unfortunately that's where the link to the Centenary Bikeway would be really valuable. One thing of note is that there actually are a lot of fire ants along this bit of the bikeway. So I stopped here actually to report this one, but you can see my other video about fire ants. And crossings aren't too bad on this bikeway, so there was one which I didn't get video of, which was really annoying, but it has a long single phase to get across 3 crossings, which is really good. But some of the other traffic light crossings are a bit slow, and that one there is just an uncontrolled crossing with the shared path, but it's pretty much a dead-end street, so it's not too much of a challenge. There are lots of driveway crossings once you're onto this shared path though, because this is a very industrial area, so you've got to have your wits about you, I guess, when businesses are operating. This was a weekend, so not so much. And oops, I had to stop because I found some more fire ants. So the path crosses over the Oxley Creek, and then just up ahead there's a path off to the right, which then takes you down under the creek and through towards Oxley and Archerfield Wetlands, which is a really nice ride. I highly recommend that. So the level of traffic stress of 1, comfort and connection is not too bad, and crossing is not too bad. There's no upgrades planned for this. This is already completed. So that still rounds out to a score of 37.6, which gives this a solid B on the tier list. It's just a shame that at both ends of it, the connections aren't terribly good to get to it. So it's a bit of an isolated oasis. Just another uncontrolled crossing. And that's basically the end of it. And the last stage of the tour is making our way from Oxley to the Centenary Motorway Bikeway. And this is an interesting experience. So we're starting here, going up this narrow footpath that joins to a weird sort of combination of tunnels underneath the roundabout for the motorway interchange above. Anyway, it's pretty ordinary. So the tunnel there goes off to the left, and from there you can get across to the other side, heading down towards what used to be Bunnings. It's being rebuilt, or across to Officeworks on the other side of Oxley Road. But for me, I'm going to keep heading along in this direction and past Oxley State School to a traffic light crossing to get across the road. Then you can see here there's no cycling infrastructure on this road at all. This is Oxley Road, so I'm taking advantage of the traffic being held up by the red light to get going down here, and I'm going to turn left into Price Street. So this is going to be pretty much what the route along here is like. It's sort of a combination of on-road, some quiet streets like this, just a few connections of off-road paths. Generally, because of this mix and match standard of facilities, it's definitely a level of traffic stress of 3 out of 4, so not something that people who are interested but concerned are going to feel terribly comfortable with. So in terms of comfort, it's not the best. I mean, there's a lot of areas which is very exposed to the sun. Navigation is a bit tricky. You really got to know which way you want to go. There's a number of different ways you can actually travel, but this way I've chosen is the one that I found is the least intimidating. But you still have to work out which streets to turn up, where paths connect, and it's not well signposted as a route at all. Connections are pretty ordinary because this is really not a very well defined cycle route, so knowing where to connect is pretty poor as it is. There are some little cut throughs, like this little bikeway through in the industrial estate in Darra, connects to Kiln Street. It doesn't even show up on the Google satellite when you look at it in Google Earth, but so this is sort of the makings of some of these connections, but from here it's sort of along the road and then down to Darra Station, and then from Darra Station there's some connections through to Centenary Bikeway, but they're really disjointed, disconnected. As I said, you need to know where you're going, plan your route. So yeah, these connections are less than ideal, let's put it that way. Now, crossings are pretty awkward. So this is a traffic light crossing to get across down to Darra Station, so that's not too bad. You get some traffic light control, but most of the crossings that you do have to experience are not controlled. You've got to go through roundabouts, jet standard intersections. So yeah, again, because this isn't a formal cycle route, the facilities aren't very good, and that extends to crossings also. So now across the road we can get down onto the road down towards Darra Station. It's pretty noteworthy to see that the width of this road, and so much of it, is taken with space for car parking for the train station. And in fact, they just spent, I don't know, $8-9 million, whatever it was, expanding the park and ride, and yet there's still a heck of a lot of street space being set aside for car parking. I think that might be a topic for another video: car parking and train stations, and how efficient that actually is, and how effective that is as a use of space. So you can see the bike parking cage on the left there, and then this is a bikeway connection to the Centenary Bikeway. So from here it's not too bad, although there's a section of it that's not great, and I'll show you that shortly. Now we're exiting the shared path, but the shared path does continue on the verge. Now this goes through another industrial area. Again, being a weekend, it's not open, but these driveways do create a little bit of risk. Have come through here during the week, and some people do come in and out of these driveways without even looking at the path, so you do have to be quite wary, unfortunately. And this recycling business, you can see I'm dodging debris. There's broken glass and shards of metal on the ground that they've left behind, and often you'll come through there and there'll be trucks and trailers parked across the bikeway, and you've got to go out on the road. It's not great. Now, I'm a big supporter of having bikeways like this that run on the verge, but there's got to be some better way to manage it so that businesses can still operate and the bikeway can get through unimpeded. So in summing up, level of traffic stress of 3, comfort 2, connections a lowly 1, and crossings a lowly 1. There is 1 point for upgrades because the next stage of the Ipswich motorway upgrade is being looked at as we speak. But that comes out to a very underwhelming 18.4 out of 50, and this is our lowest ranked bikeway section on the list with an E. So we've been doing alright. We'd been S to D to that point, but this rounds it out. But from here, the Centenary Bikeway is really good, but that might be the subject for another video. But maybe not. Depends if anyone even liked this format. Guess we'll see. So summing up the results, we've got Sylvan Road coming in with a C, which looking at this footage I think it kind of overrates it a bit. Level of traffic stress only of 3, and for a bikeway that is so important in the cycling network, it really isn't good enough for what it needs to be, so there definitely needs to be some improvement here. Bicentennial Bikeway, undoubtedly S tier. I mean, it's the lowest level of traffic stress, great connections. It's proof in the pudding. There's people of all ages and abilities using it frequently. It's a really high quality route for commuting and recreational purposes, so top marks. Goodwill Bridge to Kangaroo Point comes in with a respectable B, and it's a very nice route as well. The separation is great. There's a very low level of traffic stress, minimal crossings and things like that. So this is a really nice route, comfortable for commuters, comfortable for kids and families out for a recreational ride in the city. V1 Veloway, a comfortable A. Low level of traffic stress, good comfort. Connections could be better. There's quite a bit of a gap in between access points, but that's a bit of a minor quibble. This is a really high quality cycleway that stretches all the way into the far southern suburbs, so top marks really. Griffith to Salisbury, it's not too bad. Shared path through to the university. Bit of on-road with the university traffic, but it's not that easy to navigate if you're not sure where you're going, and can be a little bit tricky through the forest with pedestrians, but still pretty good. Now Salisbury to the Ipswich motorway bikeway, yeah, this gets a D. A lot of riding on the road with traffic that doesn't really like bikes being there, awkward crossings. This route certainly needs some improvement to really connect the Griffith University to that Ipswich motorway bikeway, but hopefully some upgrades will come in future. Ipswich motorway bikeway to Oxley, very good. Low level of traffic stress, not as comfortable as some of the others. There's not much shade and you're sort of wedged between the traffic, but it's a really good cycle route, and unfortunately it's a bit of an oasis, so it gets a B, and it'll probably get upgraded to an A with some upgrades alongside it. And finally, getting from the Ipswich motorway to the Centenary Bikeway from Oxley, that gets an E. It is a dog's breakfast. You really need to know where you're going, pick the best of a lot of bad routes, and hope for the best. So hopefully with future Ipswich motorway upgrades, this will get greatly improved. So there you have it. There's my take on these particular bike routes. Do you agree? Disagree? Get into the comments and let me know. Did you like this sort of tour? Do you like the idea of the S tier list and my quantification? If you do, let me know, like, subscribe, and maybe I'll do another one of these in the future. Until then, ride safely, drive rarely, and hopefully I'll see you out on the bikeways.